Okay, very good. Thanks for answering. All right, I guess we're gonna start now. So before we start, I just want to let you know that I've uploaded two documents via the platform. They both start with new. It's a new syllabus and a new presentation. So it's not really important, but I realized yesterday during the introduction that there was something missing in the plan of the course. Indeed, the part 4, as you can see on your screen, called Alternatives to the Current Monetary System, were missing from the plan of the course. So I've amended the syllabus and the presentation slides to make sure that now it appears clearly. So remember what I said yesterday. We're going to start with studying the banking system, monetary policy, financial crisis, and then we're going to look at alternatives to the financial crisis, and in particular, free banking and cryptocurrency. So I forgot to mention that yesterday. So I forgot to put it in the slide. So let's go back to the class now. And perhaps let me briefly remind you what we did yesterday. I think it's a good exercise to proceed this way. So we started by defining money. There were two ways that traditionally two ways we define money. One is to look at the function of money, the functions, the fact that it's a unit of account, of medium of exchange, and a store of value. Then we looked at money as a way to circumvent, to solve what we call trading frictions. The first one being the double coincidence of wants problem, the second one being imperfect memory of past transactions, and the last one being imperfect commitment. Then we started working on a bit of a monetary history. I told you that uh, people started using commodities as money, such as rice or shells. Then they discovered that precious metals or just metals, such as gold, silver, and copper, had good additional properties, such as durability, divisibility, fungibility. So mankind started using those metals around 2000 years before Christ in Mesopotamia and Egypt, and in roughly about the same time in China, although they started using copper straight away. And then we moved to banks, right? And I started telling you a story, which is what happened in reality, which is bankers taking deposits for those big, nice, precious gold and silver coins back in the Middle Ages. And in exchange for those coins, the depositors were getting some kind of certificates of deposits, which we call bills, right? And that way they could make business and transactions without having to carry those expensive gold coins around. It's indeed a bit risky to carry those around because they're highly valuable and you can lose them or you can get robbed and mugged and lose everything. So the first job of banks was actually to accept deposits, right? And that's the balance sheet that you have on your screen right now. You can see on the asset side, you have the coins that have been deposited by the customers. And on the liability side, you've got the certificates of deposit that have been printed and issued by the banks as an acknowledgement that indeed the bank owes money to the depositors, right? And then we move to this balance sheet. This balance sheet is very interesting because it's a clever banker, right? He's clever in the following sense. He realizes that actually among those bills that are in circulation, some people will ask for redemption, right? They want the bill to be turned back into a coin, but some will not. And there were always people bringing new coins. There will always be people withdrawing coins. But at the end of the day, it's very unlikely that all customers holding bills will be asking for redemption all at once, right? So if that's true, and that's true most of the time, perhaps the bank can print more bills than it has gold coins in its vault, right? And that's what you have on this balance sheet. It's an example in which the banker is actually doubling, multiplying by two the amount of bills in circulation, and the counterpart of 50% of these bills is actually indeed the coins that have been deposited, but the other counterpart is actually a loan. So the banker is lending those bills to the customers, and he's expecting the customer to pay back the loan at some point, right? And so this is a very important step in monetary history, because you realize that from that point onward, it was possible to disconnect the money supply, um, that is the amount of bills in circulation right there, from the amount of coins, from the amount of precious metal that you have, right? And that's a critical step, all right? And why is this interesting for our purpose today, and why is it interesting for today's monetary system? Well, it's interesting because today's monetary system works exactly the same way, right? If you look at another example of a balance sheet, a typical commercial balance sheet, commercial bank balance sheet looks pretty much like this. There's going to be another item right there. I'm going to talk about it very soon. It's called securities on the asset side, but forget about it for a moment. What I want to emphasize is how similar this balance sheet is compared to the previous balance sheet. There are, however, two differences. The first difference is that rather than having bills in circulation, bills printed by private commercial banks, as it used to be the case in the Middle Ages, now commercial banks, they don't issue bills, they issue deposits. What does that mean? Well, for instance, if you bring cash to your bank, the bank will take the cash and credit your deposit if you already have a deposit with that bank. And if you don't have a deposit with that bank, they will open an account for you. And that's what it means by issuing a deposit, right? So that's the first example right there. So I'm putting a one here. But if you go to your bank and ask for a loan rather than making a deposit in terms of cash, and if the bank says, yes, I'm happy to lend you the money, then they're going to credit your account, or they can open an account to you, they can issue an account to you, and they're going to credit your account, your deposit, by the amount of the loan, right? So they're going to be issuing a deposit as well, but this time not in exchange for depositing cash, but in exchange for taking up a loan, right? A loan that you are expected to pay back at some point. So again, it is very important because you realize, and we're going to do plenty of exercises today and tomorrow about that, that commercial banks, they indeed have an ability to create money. Yes, because as soon as they have credited your account with that loan, but you can spend the money, right? And the important thing to understand is that this money that the commercial banks had issued, it is not borrowing the money from someone else deposit, right? It's just creating new money. So the commercial bank has this amazing ability to expand actually its balance sheet, both the liability side by increasing the deposit and the asset side at the same moment by increasing the amount of loans. Okay, so this is very important. We're going to do a few exercises on that. So that's why I'm not going to take up questions now, because I'm sure it's going to become clearer as soon as we start working out around a few exercises. All right. So what I would like to do now is come back on the definitions of what we call monetary aggregates. So yesterday at the end of the class, I talked to you about two monetary aggregates. The first one is called base money, and the second ones are the monetary rates M1, M2, M3. So I'm going to shift to a blank page in order to illustrate more precisely what I mean by that. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to do some drawings right now. All right. So I want to start with base money. Okay. Um, and I'm going to draw a set, which I'm going to divide it into. Right. Actually, I'm going to make it more like this. So here we're going to have the bills in circulation. I'm not going to talk about coins because you don't have coins in Vietnam. Bills in circulation, right? So your 10,000 Vietnamese dong bill, the 5,000 Vietnamese dong bill, all those bills in circulation, they are part of base money. So I'm going to write that here, right? This is right. Sorry about that. Bills in circulation. And here we have the deposits. The other part of base money are the deposits. Deposits by commercial banks at the central bank. And that would be State Bank of Vietnam, right? And all that is what we called base money, which is also called M0, by the way. So M0 equals base money, all right? So it's an important money in the following sense. So this is money issued by the central bank. Okay, this is not money issued by commercial banks. As you can see, bills in circulation, the bills are printed by the central bank. It's written central bank on it. And the deposits by commercial banks at the central bank, it's also money issued by the central bank. This gonna become clearer in a moment. Okay. So what I would like to do now is draw um, the M1 aggregate. So M1 aggregate, do you remember? It's the deposit, it's the bills in circulation and the deposit by private agents at commercial banks. So they actually have the bills in circulation in common, right? So that's why I'm making a rectangle that overlaps with the bills in circulation. And all I have to do now is add deposit by households and businesses at commercial banks, right? And to be more specific, it's actually the demand deposit, right? What you call CASA, okay? Demand deposit, right? That is the cash deposit. So this corresponds to, I'm going to try to put that in a different color. I don't want to do that. Oops, gosh. Draw that again. And we'll put that in blue. Demand deposits by households and businesses at commercial banks, right? And all this corresponds to M1. This is M1, right? So my point is actually the following. There is some overlapping. I'll write the word here so that you know what I mean. Overlapping between M0 and M1. Okay, in a sense, in the following sense, they share, they have bills in circulation in common. Okay, so it's important to figure this out, right? To keep this in mind for what we're going to do in the coming slides. Okay, those are two important monetary aggregates, and that's what we call monetary aggregates. First one, M0, is all the money issued by the central bank, and it's made of bills in circulation and the deposits by commercial banks at the central bank. And the second aggregate is M1. There's also the bills in circulation inside, but the other part is the demand deposit by households and businesses at commercial banks. Okay. So in M1, you both have, that's another important thing to realize. Even though in M0, it's all money that's issued by the central bank, in M1, there's only part of it. It's just the bills in circulation that are issued by the central bank. The other part of M1 is actually issued by a commercial bank, just like in the example that I was using, uh, telling you that when you go and ask for a loan and the bank says, yes, they're going to issue a deposit. That's what I mean. When a bank issues a deposit, whether because it's accepting a cash deposit from you or whether it's because it's making a loan to you, this is private money. Private in the sense that's being issued by a private commercial bank, not a public or government institution. Okay. And here I know that you have a few banks in Vietnam that are state-owned bank, but most other banks are actually private banks. So I just want you to think in terms of, even though they're state-owned, they behave and they belong to what I call the group of private commercial banks, in the sense that their activity is driven by profits, right? So this is important, right? So perhaps I can take one or two questions at this stage if something is not clear for you, all right? So do you want to ask a question? Is that is the difference between M0 and M1? Is it clear for you? Well, no question. So I suppose it is clear. So I'm gonna move forward. I'm gonna shift back to the slide. All right. All right. So we can move forward and we can go to this slide, which we haven't covered yet. So here is a comment. The deposits issued by today's private banks are actually backed by another paper, scriptural money. Yes, that's something I briefly pointed out yesterday, right? So if we move back to this balance sheet, I told you the first difference with a balance sheet from a banker from the Middle Ages is the fact that rather than issuing bills, it is issuing deposits, right? And the second difference is that rather than having gold coins as reserves now, and that's a very fundamental point to understand at this stage, is that the reserve asset for commercial banks in today's monetary system, it is not gold coins, it is not silver coins, it is base money, that is M0, right? It is the money issued by the central bank, right? So in today's monetary system, the reserve asset is M0, whether it's in the form of cash or whether it's in the form of commercial banks deposits at the central bank. Okay, this is the reserve asset of today's monetary system. This is very important to understand and to realize because, and that's precisely the goal of this comment that I'm making here is that the deposits being issued by a commercial bank, it's fiat money, right? We define fiat money at the beginning. It's scriptural money, but the this money is backed by another paper and scriptural money, right? Whether it's bills or the deposit by a commercial bank at the central bank, it's also fiat money, right? So it's a very important point to understand, right? In today's monetary system, it looks funny, huh? Because where is the beef, as they would say in the US? Huh? You want some real stuff here, but there's no real stuff floating around, right? You have uh, fiat money, scriptural money being issued by commercial banks, and this money is backed by another sort of paper or scriptural fiat money, which is base money issued by the central bank, right? It's just a different in nature, in the sense that the money issued by the central bank is money issued by a commercial, a public institution, right? So let's talk about another important concept here. It's the reserve requirement ratio. As you probably know, it is a central bank regulation that sets the amount of funds that a depository institution must hold in reserve against specified deposit liabilities, right? So what does that mean? It means that a certain percentage of a commercial bank's deposit has to be backed, covered by base money. This is the law. This is a regulation. This is a government regulation, right? There's no way commercial banks can escape this regulation. Okay. And in Vietnam, oh, by the way, I'm going to make, I think I may have asked you that yesterday. So some of you may remember. So I'm going to make a quick poll here. I'm going to ask about the reserve requirement in Vietnam. So is it 1%? Ah, we already have the answer. Good. I was making a poll, but you're very right. It's 3% actually in Vietnam. In Vietnam, the reserve requirement ratio is 3%. What does that mean? It means that assume a commercial bank has 1,000 US. It's not US dollar, so let's say 1,000 Vietnamese dong in the form of a deposit. That means on its liability side, I mean on the asset side, it's gonna have to have 3% of this 1,000 Vietnamese dong, that is 30 Vietnamese dong in the form of reserves, right? In the form of base money, that is either cash or in the form of a deposit at the central bank, right? That's what a reserve requirement ratio is, okay? Is that clear for everyone? I'm going to show you some statistics in a moment about reserve ratios around the world. We're going to see that some countries don't even ask for reserve ratio. There are not many of them. And some countries have a much higher reserve ratio. In Vietnam, 3%, which I would say it's pretty much average, right? So that's the reserve requirement ratio right here, okay? Now, the actual reserve ratio might be different from the reserve requirement ratio. Okay. So, by the way, how do those commercial banks compute this reserve ratio? Typically, it's an average over a month. Okay, so it depends on the country, depends on the regulation, but typically, the bank has to show to the central bank every month, every 6 weeks, that they comply with this reserve requirement ratio. Well, so they might be below 3% at the beginning of the month. That's fine, as long as they're above at the end of the month, and therefore that on average they match the 3%, right? So that's what I'm saying here. The actual reserve ratio might differ from the reserve ratio requirement. Okay. So what I would like to point out here is that in my previous example, the actual reserve ratio in this example is actually 50%. Do you see that? Because the ratio of base money divided by the deposits, I'm going to do that right there, is 20K divided by 40K. And that's exactly 50%, right? So in my example, The actual reserve ratio for this bank is 50%, in the sense that 50% of the deposits are backed by base money. But as I said, in Vietnam, today, the reserve ratio requirement is 3%. So you don't have to hold 50% of your deposit in the form of base money, right? You can do 3, okay, as low as 3. In Europe, it's actually 1%. What a joke, 1%. I don't think people know that. Some do. Now you do. All right. So 50% of the bank's liabilities are backed by base money. And as I said, today's reserve ratios and requirements, they're anywhere between 0 and 25%, depending on the country. So let's have a look at some statistics now. Not yet. Let's talk a little bit more about the reserve ratio. So the goal of the reserve ratio requirement is to prevent bank run. Do you know what a bank run is, right? It's when people realize that not all deposits, but it's not really that they realize it, but suddenly people rush to the bank and ask for their deposit to be turned into cash. That's what a bank run is, right? It's when there is some sort of panic. People panic, right? And they ask for redemption. I want my cash. I want my money back. You're a bank. You're saying, I have that much money. Can I have it in cash, please? You can do that every day. It's okay because there's always a certain amount of cash that banks they hold in their vault to satisfy your demand. The problem is that when everybody is rushing for those 3%, right? I think you understand now, right? When you have 3% of all the deposits only that are covered by base money, well, that means that if every single customer asks for redemption, only 3% of those customers will be able to get their cash, right? 97% of customers will be frustrated. Right? That's called a bank run, right? In case of a bank run, the bank is forced to close until some loans are repaid in gold coins or base money, or what the bank can do is sell some of the securities that it bought with some of those deposits in order to recover the cash. But when everybody does that, the problem is that the asset prices are going down, so they don't recover as much cash as they were hoping, and that's typically when the bank starts being in trouble. Right? That's exactly the start of a banking crisis. Right? We're going to talk extensively about that later on during this class. So soon we will see that reserve ratios are not really needed, as banks have incentives to hold base money anyway, for 2 reasons. The first one is cash withdrawal, and the second is interbank payment. So we're going to talk about that extensively again, but I just want to briefly talk about it now. I hope you understand, I'm sure you do, that the goal of the reserve ratio requirement is to make sure that at least a certain percentage, a certain amount of the deposits are covered by cash, right? But you don't really need that to ensure that the commercial bank will be holding cash. Why is that? Because there's always going to be a demand for cash coming from customers. The first one is cash withdrawal. Every day, I'm not talking about bank runs here. I'm just talking about everyday business, right? You wake up in the morning, you go to your daily job, you withdraw some cash at the bank for the midday lunch, right? Well, cash withdrawals mean the bank has to hold a certain amount of cash at hand, right? So for this first reason, at least, I'm going to answer that question in a moment, sir or Mrs. So that's for that very first reason, cash withdrawal. We know commercial banks are going to hold a certain amount of cash, a certain amount of base money. The other reason why commercial banks are holding base money is because of interbank payment. And again, we're going to work on that today very shortly. What is an interbank payment? An interbank payment is when at the end of the day, commercial bank, they compute the bilateral difference between all the payments coming in and out from their account to the other banks, and the net The difference has to be paid. And how is it paid? It's paid with base money, right? There's no way, well, they could, and we're going to see that in Vietnam. Interestingly enough, apparently they do some of that. They tend to pay with their own money, but they're not supposed to do that. And in the West, for instance, they're not doing it. They're just paying with base money, right? So for these two reasons, cash withdrawal and interbank payment, commercial banks will anyway hold a certain amount of base money. So my point is, you don't really need a reserve ratio requirement precisely because of these two reasons. So now let me answer that question. So are interbank payments reasons when bank B needs to liquidate from bank A's liability? Are interbank payments reason why bank B needs to liquidate from bank A's liability? I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm sorry. It's probably my. I suggest perhaps we move a little bit forward, and perhaps it's going to be clearer. But if your question is, does bank B need to sell some of its assets to get the money to pay bank A? Then the answer is yes. All right, unless bank B already has the cash, right? A sufficient amount of cash to pay the other bank, right? But if it doesn't have enough cash to make the interbank payment, then it's going to have to sell some of its assets, typically some bonds and so on. Okay. But don't worry, guys. We're gonna work on that. So here I'm just introducing the general concept. If you understand right away, that's fine. That's very good. If you don't worry, because we're gonna come back on this extensively. And I can see, okay, sir. I can see that another student is writing something, so I'm going to wait for the question to pop up, and I'll answer it. In the case interbank payments occur overnight or in a period. Good question. We're going to talk about that, but that's very interesting. Yes, typically, commercial bank they process interbank payment at the end of the day. Yes, more and more we're moving toward a live system in the sense that there will be processing interbank payment directly, not waiting for end of the day settlement. All right, can you hear me? There was a funny stuff going on with the microphone. Good. All right, so yes, typically it's at the end of the day, but sometimes it's gonna, as I was saying, in some system, I know in Europe they're trying to do that. They're moving toward instantaneous settlements. Right? I'm going to tell you a funny story about that shortly, but New Zealand. All right, let's move on. So another interesting concept before I'm going to show you statistics. It's the money multiplier. What is the money multiplier? The money multiplier somehow tells you how much of your own money as a commercial bank you can issue given the amount of base money that you have in your assets, right? So for instance, assume you have a 10% reserve ratio requirement, right? For every single deposit, you need to hold 10% in the form of base money, right? If the reserve ratio requirement is 10%, then for each dollar of base money, then you can have $10 of deposits, right? Because 10% of $10 is $1. So that means your $10 deposit is covered. And that's true in the old days as well. For $1 of gold coin, you could print $10 in terms of bills, right? So that's what we call the money multiplier. It's actually one right there. It's 1 divided by the reserve ratio requirement. Okay. So, for instance, in Vietnam, the reserve ratio requirement is 0.3%. So that means the money multiplier is 33. Technically, if you look in the textbook, it's a little bit more complicated than that, the exact formula for the money multiplier, but I don't want to complicate things needlessly here. I just want you to understand the intuition, right? And the intuition is very simple. It's a money multiplier tells you how much of your base money can be multiplied into deposits. That's what it means, right? So that's the idea. So let's move on. So another piece of vocabulary, today's system is known as fractional reserve banking. Why is that? Because only a fraction of deposits are backed by the monetary base. All right. Yes, in Vietnam, that would be 3%. So it's fractional reserve banking. Okay. Sometimes you read in the press, there was a referendum in Switzerland about that, for instance. Should we have a 100% reserve banking system? What does that mean? That would be a banking system in which every Vietnamese dong of deposit would be covered by 1 Vietnamese dong of base money. Okay, that's I cannot remember the exact name. As I think it's full. I don't remember anyway. But no country around the world has that. Okay, all countries have a fractional reserve banking system, right? Yes, so these are the statistics I wanted to talk about, right? So those are some reserve ratios around the world. So as you can see here, so we have no reserve ratio, a reserve ratio between 0 and 5%, between 6 and 15%, and greater than 15%. So greater than 16%, you have typically some relatively poor or unstable countries, right? Like Iraq, Liberia, Malawi. No, Iraq is there twice. That's funny. And on the other side, you have countries that have no reserve requirement, just like this. So you have Australia, Canada, Denmark, Mexico, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, Timor-Leste, and the United Kingdom, right? Where's Vietnam? So I don't think Vietnam is in this list, but we know already for Vietnam it's 3%. So Vietnam would be in that column. All right. What about Europe? So we have the European Central Bank here, ECB. It says 2%, but actually it's not the case anymore. Now it's 1% in Europe. That's another one. Anyway, so 1% in Europe. Some more statistics, still from the International Monetary Fund. Do we have Vietnam? Yes, we have Vietnam. That's between 1 and 12%. So I guess it depends on the sort of deposits, right? For some term deposit, it might be different, or it depends on the amount as well, right? That's what you have in the US, for instance. In the US, there are different reserve ratios depending on the size of the deposits, right? Okay, so to finish this history of money, and as someone very interestingly highlighted yesterday, the third and not final, but a very important last step in the history of money is when President Richard Nixon decided in 1971 to end the convertibility of the US dollar into gold, right? You remember this conversation we had yesterday. I told you before 1971, you had the right by law to go to the central bank and ask for your bills to be turned into gold. After 1971, you could not do that anymore. All right, so as I promised, here are a few exercises. So before So here's the first exercise. But before you read it, I would just like to briefly explain how I would like you to do that. So uh, we have three questions actually, because question number 4, I would like to keep that question for later on, right? Because it's about somehow free banking. So it's a bit early to do that now. So don't do question 4, okay? But you're gonna have to do question 1, 2, and 3. So let's read this together, and then I'm gonna give you the instructions. So, and as you can see, you have the balance sheet right after. So the banking system is made of, assume the banking system is made of two banks, Bank A and Bank B. And they are both commercial banks like Vietcom Bank and Vietinbank, with the following assets and liabilities. So as I showed you, this is Bank A right there. This is Bank B right there. They have some reserves, and by reserves I mean base money, right? So that's M0. So to make sure you get it, it's M0, right? So it could be cash, or it could be deposits at the central bank, sorry, right? But this is reserve. This is base money, right? Base money. So bank has 60K. Bank, whoops. Um, I'm going to change that. No, I'm not. They have the same balance sheet, actually. That's fine. So they both have 60Ks in terms of reserves. They have loans, a loan portfolio of 40Ks, right? That's right there. And they have a deposit, some deposits for 100,000 US dollars, right? For a total, in both cases, of 100,000 US dollars, all right? So those are the balance sheets you're going to be working with. So suppose that at the end of day 1, there's going to be some payments coming from Bank A to Bank B's customers, right? So we're going to say that total electronic payment from Bank A's customers to Bank B's customers is equal to 10,000 US dollars. What do I mean by that? I mean, assume I am banking at Bank A, and I go to a very nice coffee shop that I know, and I buy a nice coffee, and I pay with my credit card. That's an electronic payment, right? And the coffee shop is banking with Bank B, right? So that's going to be money going from Bank A, my account, to the coffee shop's account at Bank B. That's one example. But you're going to have pay, of course, you're going to have payments the other way around, right? You're going to have payments coming from Bank B's customer to Bank A's customer. That's what you have here. Total electronic payments from Bank B's customer to Bank A's customers, this time 20,000 US dollars, all right? So here are the questions. At the end of day 1, first question, which bank owes money to the other one and how much? Question number 2, how is the bank in debt going to pay the other bank? Finally, show the bank's T accounts, so the balance sheet, after such payment. All right. So this is, so you're going to be starting with this and as a basis, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to allocate you into what we call, I'm going to shift that to English, otherwise it's going to be difficult. Where is that? That's right there, English. So I'm going to do what we called breakout rooms, okay? Where is the US? Good question. It's not there. Let me find the reserve ratio for the US. I think it's 10%, but it depends on the account. It's not a single number. So I have it in front of me. So to answer your question, as of January 1st, 2018, banks with deposits less than 16 million have no reserve requirements. Banks with between 16 million and 122.3 million in deposits have a reserve requirement of 3%, just like Vietnam. And for banks that have more than 122.3 million in deposits, the reserve requirement is 10%. All right, so it's 0, 3, 10%, depending on the amount of deposits at the bank. All right. Um, so let's go back. So yeah, I'm gonna create breakout rooms. Okay, what we call breakout rooms. So in those breakout rooms, you will be allocated randomly. I'm sorry, I'm sure you would like to work with your friends, but it would take too much time to organize this, especially remotely. So I'm going to create breakout rooms. There's going to be two or three of you per rooms, and I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to work out this exercise, okay, to discuss it between you. And I might pop up in some rooms and discuss with you the exercise, or you may have questions, okay? And I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do that. So I want you to think about the exercise. It's important, right? Because after, obviously, I'm going to give you the answer, but when I give you the answer, it always sounds like, oh yeah, easy, I would have done the same. But trust me, I've done these exercises a lot of time with some former students, whether in France or in Australia or in Vietnam. I always get a lot of very interesting question and answers. Some of them are true, some are not, and you always learn from your mistakes, right? So I really want you. I'm going to ask you, please, to spend some brain power trying to. Well, this exercise is easy and relatively easy. All right, so before I create those breakout rooms, because I won't be able to communicate with the whole group when you are in the breakout room, I think, do you have any question on these exercises? Is it clear for you what you have to do? And the good thing about breakout rooms is we're going to mix the Ho Chi Minh student and the Hanoi student, right? Which is unusual. So that's a good opportunity for you to meet some new persons. All right, so it looks like you understand the exercise. I'm going to create these breakout rooms. And once you're done, I think you just need to close it and you will be back to the main teaching room. And if it's not working this way, don't worry. At the end of the 10 minutes, it's going to close down and you're all going to come back here. And if you're not, well, just log out, log back in, and it should not be a problem. All right, so let's create those breakout rooms. All right, number of rooms. I don't know. I want the number of students. I don't want the number of. So how many of you are? You are 28. So I'm going to create 10 rooms. All right, 10 rooms. Oh, I can create 8 rooms at most. All right, so duration 10 minutes. Allow users to choose a record room. No, and randomly assign. That's right. I don't want to be part of it. Not assign. Good. That's Trump. Okay, let's do that and see you in 10 minutes. I'm going to show up in the rooms anyway. All right. Welcome back, everyone. So, I hope you enjoyed the exercises and that you managed to work in the breakout rooms. I've showed up in a couple of them, and it looks like people were actively working. So that's very good. I would like to thank you for participating. So I'm going to start with answering this first and relatively easy exercise, right? So let me first draw a big white square so that I can do what I want. Not what I want. Okay, so I'm going to move to a blank presentation again. Slide 2, for instance. So what we know is that we have two banks, right? Bank A and Bank B, right? Okay, and Bank B. Okay, so that's Bank A, that's Bank B. Okay, so we have an answer here. I'm just gonna start simply with answering. I'm gonna look at what you said in a moment. So we know we have 10,000 going this way, right? So I'm gonna put that here. 10,000 euros going this way, and we have also 20,000 going this way, right? So here it is, 20,000. Okay, so that's the way it works. You have some payments going in this direction, some payments going in the other direction. So by the way, there might as well be some uh, internal payments. We're going to talk about that in a moment. For instance, customers from Bank B paying customers from Bank B. Similarly, we can have customers from Bank A paying customers from Bank A. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, at the moment I just want to do the exercise. So the thing is, so we have 10,000 grants going from Bank A customers to Bank B's customers, and 20 grants going the other way. One option would be Bank A pays Bank B, and then Bank B pays Bank A. Typically, that's not the way it works. They're going to compute the difference, right? And the difference means that because Bank B's customers are making more payments toward Bank A than Bank A's customers toward Bank B's, it means that Bank B owes 20,000 minus 10,000 equal 10,000 Bank A. All right? Everybody agrees with that? So that's what we're gonna do, okay? So I'm gonna shift back to the balance sheet now. All right, I think I can do that right there. I've prepared them for you. Oh, not this one, not this one, not this one. Oh, it's on the other. So I'm gonna shift back to the regular presentation. There we go. So let's be rigorous here. So Bank A, we know we have 10 grand that are moving. Okay, so we have minus 10K. Okay, that's the payment toward Bank B, but we have also plus 20K, right? So that's a net. So I'm going to draw a line. That's a net of plus 10, right? So I'm going to draw a line right there. and say now we have at 110K. Okay. Um, Wait a second. Let me go back to the stuff. So, total electronic payment coming from bank A's customers to bank B's customers. Yes. So, total electronic payment coming from bank B's customer to bank A's customers. So, what did I say? Sorry. We have 10 grants coming from bank A's to bank B's customers and 20 grand coming from bank. It's bank B that owe bank A's money, right? What did I say? Oops, that's not the one. Yes, it is. Yes, 10. So it's bank B that owes. Yeah, that's what I said. So that's exactly. So bank B owes money to bank A, right? So let's move back to the main presentation right there. So there we go. Let's do the deposits on bank B now. So bank B receives 10K from bank A. So plus 10K, right? And bank B spends 20K, so minus 20K, right? So if we compute the net, and I'm going to draw a nice line, this is better. That's 110K, 100 plus 10 minus 20, that's 90K, right? So we have 90K. All right, so that means we need to cross that out as well because that's no longer true. And we need to replace it by the correct number, which is, in the case of bank A, that would be 110K. In the case of bank B, the total would be 90K. All right. Now the question is, we need to balance those balance sheet, right? So we know that bank B owes money to bank A, okay? It owes it 10 grand, 10,000. So how is it going to pay? Well, as I said yesterday and today, base money, this reserves, is used for precisely that, for interbank payments, right? So Bank B is going to have to use some of its reserves to pay Bank A. So we're gonna have here minus K, right? With a grand total. Oops, not showing up. Why is that? Let me do that again. Minus K. So for a grand total of now 50. Okay. Make it smaller. Oops, just like that. So we're gonna have 50K. All right. So that means we need to cross that out as well because it's no longer true. Now we have 90K as well. And for Bank A, well, Bank A is going to receive precisely those 10K. So it's going to have plus 10K. So that it reaches a total of 70K. Okay. And that means that the grand total on its asset side has increased now, and it's no longer 100K, it's 110K. All right. So that's how you should address this exercise, and that's how you should work out this exercise. So let me go back to the questions to make sure we answered all of them. So question one: which bank owes money to the other one, and by how much? So bank B owes money to bank A. By how much? We see 10,000 US dollar. Question number two: how is the bank in debt? So that's bank B going to pay the other bank. Well, it's going to pay with base money, right? That's the way things work. So again, in Vietnam, you guys are doing some funny stuff. A couple of years ago, when I gave this class in Ho Chi Minh City, one student was from the central bank, and he told me a very interesting thing. He told me, well, we do that up until 3 p.m. After 3 p.m., interbank payments are closed, so we use our vostre nostro account. So the fact that we're using our own money to pay the other banks. But I want you to forget about this right now because first of all, it's unusual, and second, I want you to understand how it should work or how it works in normal times, I would say. Okay, but we're going to talk about the Vietnamese case a little bit later. But in around the world, and especially in the West, interbank payments are paid with base money, right? So that's question number two. Question number three: show the bank T accounts, balance sheet after such payment. Well, that's exactly what we did here. You can see that the balance sheet, they are still balanced, right? The liability side of bank A, I'm going to answer the various questions in a moment. I just want to finish this. As you can see, the bank A's balance sheet has expanded and bank B's balance sheet has shrinked. Bank A's balance sheet has expanded. Why? Because it receives more payment than it made payments, and the difference was paid in base money, right? That's why they move up to 110K, right? And for Bank B, the balance sheet has shrunk. Why? Because it made more payments toward Bank A's customer than it received payment from Bank A's customer. So the deposits, the amount of deposits shrinked, and the difference, the 10K, had to be paid in base money. So that's why we had those minus 10Ks here. And therefore, the balance sheet has shrunk, the assets have fallen to 90Ks, and the liabilities have fallen to 90K. Okay? So I'm going to answer the question now. So can Bank B re-borrow from Bank A instead of paying to Bank A with them? Yes, it can. It's not supposed to do that. Okay, it's the story I was telling before. So let assume I'm talking about the West here. So Europe, the US. Typically, the answer to your question would be no, right? They have to wait for the interbank payment to be processed, and they have to use base money. That's the end of the story. However, in various different countries, they play with the rules a little bit, and they can indeed do the sort of things that you could do. So, for instance, here, and that was actually precisely the purpose of question 4 here, but I don't want to do it now. There are various different options. One option would be Bank B could make a loan to Bank A, right? And that would be an option. And if Bank A already had, or if Bank B already had an account at Bank A, that account would shrink. So there are various different options, but we're gonna talk about that later on. Now, I really would like you to focus and to keep in mind just one thing: interbank payments are paid with base money. Okay. So to answer your question, can Bank B re-borrow from Bank A instead of paying? Yes, in theory it can, but I don't want to talk about it now because now I want you to understand interbank payment the proper way using base money. Okay, that's how it works in Europe, in the US, in Vietnam before 3 p.m. Okay, we're gonna talk about after 3 p.m. later on when you guys are solid already on this stuff, right? Otherwise, it's gonna be too complicated. Other comment. So in the West, they don't do nostro and vostro net off. That's weird for me. Yes, they don't. They use base money to make interbank payment. I'm not saying banks don't have an account in each other banks, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying interbank payments are being processed and paid using base money. Okay? But again, we're gonna do that later on, especially when we talk about free banking, because what you guys are doing after 3 p.m. is pretty much free banking. You're doing away with the central bank. You're doing your own stuff between banks, right? I'm gonna pay bank A with my own money as bank B, right? That's fine. It's called free banking. It's called I don't need central bank money. I like the idea personally, but that's not the way we start teaching this class, right? Typically, that works with base money. Base money is the asset that banks are using to pay each other. All right. So again, we're going to do that later, but I want you to understand how it works with base money. Is it clear for everyone? Or do you guys have any question? Yes, yes, yes. I have a bunch of yes. I like that. Very good. I'm happy to have a no as well. I'm happy to re-explain anything you want me to come back on. That's perfectly fine. If there's a particular point that sounds strange to you, okay? So bottom line of this exercise, if there's no question, the bottom line is the following. At the end of the day, depending on the country, banks, all the commercial banks, they have to process the bilateral payments between each other. They compute the net, right? They make the difference, they calculate the difference, and the bank in debt has to pay the other bank, sorry, with base money. That's it. Okay. That's the way it works. All right. Very important. So the funny story I want to talk to you about is I told you I lived in New Zealand for a few years, and one day I remember walking into a shop, like a dairy shop, to buy some stuff, and it was relatively late in the day. I think it was 6 p.m. and I wanted to pay with my electronic card, and the payment was very slow. So I talked to the cashier and said, that's funny. It's taking an unusual amount of time to process the transaction. And you know what the lady answered? She said, well, that's because they're making interbank payments at this time, so that's why it's slow. So I was really blown away, right? I'm the university professor. I'm supposed to know this stuff about monetary and interbank payments. And this was this cashier lady in the middle of nowhere who was teaching me about the way things work in New Zealand. So I found that really amazing. And I like to tell this story because it illustrates exactly what we're saying, right? There are end of the day interbank payments, and it puts a burden on the computer of the processing system. So that's why it was slow around that time, right? That we're talking back in 2005, right? So things have changed, I'm sure, since then, and now perhaps it's getting way faster. But anyway, that was our first exercise. So because I don't see any additional question, we're gonna move to the next one. Um, Today, I don't think we're gonna do a break, guys, because we're just doing exercises. So I think it's fine. I think I'm gonna do this 5 minute break every time. It's just me talking, right? But because you have the exercises today, well, I think we're gonna do away with the break. But typically, we're gonna have this break. Yeah. All right, solution in class. So I've given that to you already. So we're gonna move to the second exercise. All right. So let's read this together. So exercise 2. The banking system again is made of two banks, bank A and bank B, with the following assets and liabilities. So again, it's the next slide. You have it right there. It's the same. Suppose now that, that's interesting. Bank A lends $10,000 to its customer A1. And assume that customer A1 uses that money, that newly created money, to purchase a car from customer B1, and customer B1 is banking at bank B. Remember, the car price is 10,000 US dollar. So first question, Represent Bank A's balance sheet after the credit operation. Then represent Bank A's and Bank B's balance sheet after the car purchase. And question number 3, what conclusions can be drawn from this operation? So here conclusion, I mean in very general terms, right? And then there's going to be a bonus question, which I'm going to do myself. Well, you can think about it during your exercise time if you want. How would you record the interest income, assuming it's 10% at the end of the year for Bank A? Okay, but for question 1, 2, and 3, forget about the interest rate. Okay, you just forget about the interest rate for question um, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, we're going to bring back the interest rates in question number 4. Okay, so I can see that some of you are already answering the question. Again, I'm going to do the breakout room things so that you can talk between you. I think it's useful exercise because when you think about an exercise, when I provide you the answer, either you're correct and you're happy, and if you're not correct, you understand where your mistake is coming from. So I think it's important to work on that. Okay. So again, I'm going to create some breakout rooms, 8 of them. Okay, and I'm going to pop up in some of them, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes as well. All right. Randomly assign. By the way, everything is clear? All clear? All right. So I'm going to do the breakout rooms. 8 rooms, 10 minutes. Randomly assign. There you go. All right, welcome back, everyone. So I'm going to provide the answer to this exercise now. Again, feel free to ask a question anytime. So in this exercise, we're looking at something very fundamental because we're looking at borrowing loans and how this translates for the bank making the loan and for the bank receiving the loan through the car purchase, right? So, and in particular, this is going to allow us to illustrate the process of money creation, all right? So we have two banks, and Bank A makes a loan, a $10,000 loan to customer A1. So the first question is represent Bank A's balance sheet after that credit operation. So we're going to do that now. So Bank A is right there. So we're gonna first of all we're gonna make the loan, right? So we have a 10 grand loan here. Okay, right. And as a result, the loan portfolio of the bank has increased, right, to 50K. That's what we have here. And the amount of deposit, and that's the magic of the banking job, the amount of deposits has increased by 10K. Yes, amazing. That's as simple as this. And therefore, the total amount of deposits has increased as well. This is no longer true. This has increased to 110K, right? Therefore, again, the liabilities are increased, as have assets. All right. So, very interesting. So, what happened here? Well, we have this. The bank has decided to make the loan to the customer, so it has increased its loan portfolio, as you can see. I'm going to put that in grid instead. Uh, right. So the loan portfolio has increased by 10K, and the deposits have increased by 10K. So this is really very spectacular, actually. As you can see, a bank has an ability to expand its balance sheet. I wish I could do the same. Okay, I could expand my balance sheet. Only banks can do that. They can create money. They have created money, right? There's now 10 additional grants of US dollar available for this customer to spend, right? And he's going to spend it on his car. So that's the purpose of the second question. So let's look at the second question. Represent Bank A's and Bank B's balance sheet after the car purchase, right? So we're gonna do the car purchase now. So I'm gonna use a different color now. So I can use, for instance, purple like this would be nice. So the car purchase. So the customer is using his money to buy the car. So first of all, he's gonna spend the 10 grand, right? So we're gonna have minus 10K, right? Therefore, we have a new total for deposits and we have a new total for liabilities, right? And this new total would be 100K, 100Ks, right? Because he's now spending the money on the car, right? He's spending the 10Ks. So what does that mean for Bank B? Well, Bank B, there's one customer, the car dealer, he's receiving the 10Ks. So we have plus 10Ks, right? Okay. And what does that mean? That means that we have a new total for deposits of 110, and therefore we have a new total as well for liabilities, right? So that's 110K, 110K. Now there's something left to do, but you already know that because we've done an exercise in that sense, is the fact that here the balance sheet, they're not balanced, right? There's a problem. There's some money going from bank A's customer to bank B's customer. How is bank A going to make that payment? Again, it's going to use base money. This is an interbank payment, right? So bank A is going to use some of its base money. So we're going to have minus 10K. And bank B is going to receive that money. So we're going to have plus 10K here. All right, so we need to adjust the new total. So here, 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 and here. Okay, with a new total of reserves for bank A now that has fallen to 50K. The total asset side that has fallen to 100K. As for bank B, it's the other way around. Its reserve have increased to 70K. And its asset side, which is made of reserves and loans, has increased to 110K. Okay. So that's for question 1 and 2. Okay, so customer A1 has used the money to buy a car from someone banking at bank B. Therefore, the money has moved from his account to um, the car dealer's account at bank B. That means that the bank A has to pay bank B. And how is it going to do that? It's going to do it with the usual stuff, that is base money, right? So we have minus 10K here. And we have plus 10K because that's where the money lands. All right. So now question number 3, what conclusions can be drawn from this operation, right? So there are a few conclusions. So I would say maybe I'm going to put that in share notes. So um, first conclusion 1, I'm going to say new money has been created, right? Ex nihilo, that's Latin language. That's the language that the Roman were using. But we're still using this expression in French and in English. So, but not using it now. Ex nihilo means also out of the blue, out of thin air. I'm teaching you English right now. Out of thin air. Those are all expressions. That means new money has been created. It's amazing, right? Remember, in the commodity money system, there was no way this could be done. You wanted to create new money, you needed to find gold or silver. That's it. Or you have to melt your silverware or your jewelry. And you don't have to do that anymore. Here, just credit the customer's account, and that's it. And you're gonna increase your loan portfolio, and that's it. So new money has been created, right? I think it's very important. Second conclusion. So maybe you wanna say something here. I'm gonna look at the public chat. No comments. I'm moving back to share notes. Conclusions. So, so what else can we say? We can say that bank A's reserve ratio has used to be 60%, right? And now it's 50%, has decreased from 60% to 50%, right? Because it used to be 60K divided by 100K, and now it's 50K divided by 100K, right? That has fallen. As for bank B's. Uh, has not gonna be the affiliation, but I think we can see that. Okay. What else can we say? There has been some leaks from bank A to bank B, in the sense that the new money created by bank A has landed. That's a funny word, so I'm going to put it in quote. Has landed into funds account at bank B. Going back to the chat because someone is typing something. Oh, we could not see. Ah, yes. Please check the shared notes. There's an option. It's probably on the left-hand side of your screen. Yes, sir. Good. Very good. So I'm in shared notes right now. So I'm answering question 3. I'm drawing some conclusions about this exercise, right? And one conclusion is new money has been created out of nowhere. Second conclusion, the reserve ratios have changed, obviously. And third, I think there's some interesting things going on and some leaks, right, from bank A to bank B, right? In the sense that the new money created by bank A has landed into someone's account at bank B. So that's a funny thing, right? You're a bank, you create money, and it ends up in another bank, right? But that's every day. This is happening every day in the banking industry, right? But here I'm just looking at an example. But you have to realize that there are millions of payments going from bank A to bank B and from bank B to bank A. So even though you create money that lands into your competitors, it works the other way around as well. Probably bank B made some loan to some customers, and that money landed on bank A's customers account at some point. Okay. So it's important to understand that there's some dynamics going on. There's always money moving from one bank to the other. What starts being a problem is when one bank is always in debt towards the other bank. That means it's probably creating too much money, right? We're going to talk about that later on, but assume you have a bank that keeps making loans to everybody, right? Everyone that walks into the bank, they're making him a $1 million loan, right? That means this bank is going to keep paying. And because it needs to pay with base money, that's going to cost it a lot, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is that it's perfectly normal to have payment flows from one bank to the other and vice versa and the other way around. And the difference is settled with base money. It starts being a problem when one bank is always in deficit. Okay. So is there anything else you want to say, comment on this exercise in terms of conclusions with that? Or do you have any questions perhaps? Right, no question it seems. So I think we're going to do question 4 now. I told you, a bonus question, how would you record the interest income at the at the end of the year for bank A? So I think I'm gonna move to a blank presentation, right? Perhaps here. So how are we going to work this out? Hmm. How are we going to do that? So I'm just going to talk in net here. So we have the loan that was equal to 10K, right? 10K, and we had the deposit I'm just doing the, I'm just focusing on what's moving here, right? Deposit was plus 10K, right? You want to compute the interest income. Well, I think the best way to do it is the following. Is 10% of 10K is going to be 1K. So we're going to have plus 1, sorry, plus 1K for interests to be paid. It's too small. Delete that. Plus 1K, that's interest. Interest to be paid. You see, you borrow 10 grand, but it's 10% interest rate, so you're gonna have to pay 11 grand. I'm sorry, that's the purpose of a loan, right? You pay back the loan, but with an interest. So actually, the loan amount has increased to 11 grand, right? That's at the end of the year. Now not complicated, but how do we balance those things? Because we have 11 on the asset side and we have 10 on the liability side. Well, the thing to realize is the following, is that this interest rate to be paid, I don't want this color, up on that color, this 1K here, this is an income for the commercial bank. So it's going to go into its income statement, and everything else being equal, it's gonna end up at the end of the year into its equity, right? Because you know that the difference between all your income and all your expenses, it's called your profit, right? And it's gonna go straight into your equity. So we're gonna work it out this way. We're gonna put at the end of the year, we're gonna have equity plus 1K. That's an ugly, not an easy color to read, so I'm gonna put that in there. All right. So now we have 11 grand plus 11 grand on both sides, right? Plus 11 grand, assuming everything else is unchanged. Okay, so that's how you compute the interest income. Obviously, it's going to increase the size of the loan because you have to pay back the loan plus interest. And it's going to increase the liabilities in the sense that this is an income for the bank. That's how banks make a living, by the way. I'm sure you know that. So this income, everything else being the same, is gonna go straight up into increasing the equity of the bank. Okay. So let's go back to the main presentation now. So do we have any question at this stage? You can type your question, you can ask using the microphone, it's really up to you. But perhaps you don't have any questions, so it looks like there's no, yep, someone is typing, so I'm gonna wait for the question. Not at the moment. I think we can go ahead. No worries. Let's do that. Okay. Last exercise for today, I think, exercise 3. It's in order to illustrate one particular point. I told you one way to create new money is by making a loan, and I think exercise 2 was very straightforward about this, right? There's another way to create new money, and it is when you monetize. I'm going to write that up so that you know what I mean. It's when you monetize foreign currencies. Okay. And the whole point of this exercise is precisely going to be to do that. Okay. So here, how it goes. So it's a shorter exercise. The banking system is made of two banks, Bank A and Bank B, with the following assets and liabilities given in class, right there. Um, Assume that customer A1 from bank A brings 10,000 euros in cash to his bank to make a deposit and asks it to convert them into US dollars. So implicitly here, we're talking about US banks, right? So if you make a deposit in euros, if you're bringing euros to a US bank, it's going to have to be converted. It's going to have to be changed into US dollars. So that's exactly what we're doing here. Okay. So you have a customer, perhaps he's coming back from holidays in France, and he has 10,000 euros in cash, and he said, I'm not going to use that cash in US because in US we use dollars. So he walks to his bank and say, could you please turn those 10,000 euros in US dollars and deposit them into my account. Okay, so that's another important things. Um, these converted euros are deposited into his or her account. All right. Question one: represent Bank A's balance sheet after the foreign exchange operation. Question number two: what are the implications for the money supply of trade surpluses and trade deficits at the country level? Why is it I'm asking this question? Well, you need to think a little bit about that. But if you're a country such as China, which is running large trade surpluses, that means there's a big inflow of foreign currencies into China, just like in my example. So this may have some implications on the money supply, and that's what I want you to think about. Okay. So again, I'm going to make breakout rooms, but this time I'm going to make it 8 minutes only because it's a bit of a shorter exercise. One advice to you here in this exercise, you're going to have to be creative in the sense that you're going to have to create a new item in the balance sheet. In the previous exercises, you only had to play with existing accounts like loans, reserves, and deposits. But here you're going to have to be creative. Think about something that's going to fit in and to help you answer this question. Okay, so let's do that. Breakout rooms. As I said, it's going to be a bit shorter. I'm going to put 8 minutes. I'll talk to you soon. All right. Welcome back, everyone. So I'm going to answer the exercise now. So we have a customer that comes back from holidays and is bringing back some cash, some euro cash, but because he lives in the US, he wants it to be converted into US dollars. So he walks to his bank and say, could you please turn that into US dollars? So the question is, how do we handle this? So we know that probably the deposits are going to increase, right? And because the exchange rate is 1 to 1, that means that the 10,000 euros are going to be transformed into 10,000 US dollar, right? So in terms of deposits, we know that at least they're going to be increasing, right? I'm going to change this. By the way, there's nothing going on with Bangby, right? So we can, we're not going to care. And so the total in terms of liabilities has increased to 110K. Okay. The question is, how do we handle that on the asset side? Because you're in the US banking system, it's a US bank. When you're bringing euros, you're not bringing reserves. Remember, reserves is base money. It's M0. And M0 is made of the coins and bills in circulation in the US, not in Europe, and the deposit by US commercial bank at the US central bank. And that's not what euros are either, right? So it cannot be reserves that increase. Is it a loan? No, it's not a loan, right? The bank is not making a loan to its customer. So it has to be something different. So what it is actually is simply another sort of asset, which we're going to call foreign currency. And you're going to see that in banks, they do have they do hold a certain amount of foreign currency. So that's going to be exactly for 10Ks, right? So that means that the total amount of liabilities has increased as well, and this time to reach 110Ks as well. Okay, so that's how it works. Okay, and that's something important to realize, right? It's that new money has been created as well. New money has been created. I'm going to write that in. I'm going to take your question in a moment. Um, new money in the sense of USD has been created. So our foreign currency should be Euro 10K, I think. Um, good comment. No, it's not. Why? Because we are in the USA, and in the USA, the official unit of account is the US dollar. Therefore, everything that enters a commercial balance sheet or any commercial enterprises, by the way, domiciliated in the US has to be recorded in US dollars. So they have to compute the conversion. They have to make the foreign exchange in their balance sheet so that it shows up in US dollar. So I know it's euros, but those euros are recorded in terms of US dollar. And because in my exercise, remember, right, the exchange rate is 1. Look, that means 1 USD equal 1 euro. Then that's why we have 10 euros equal 10Ks. Okay. So to answer the first comment, foreign currency should be euro 10K, I think. No, precisely because everything has to be in US dollar in the balance sheet. Otherwise, you would have Thai baht, you would have Chinese yuan, you would have Australian dollar. That would be a complete mess. Your balance sheet would be a complete mess. So everything has to be in US dollar. All right. All right. I think in here the 10k euro is equal to exactly. That's why Professor write 10k. Unit of account of the balance sheet. Exactly. The reporting, yeah, that's the right term. Thank you. The reporting currency is actually US dollar. You're right. Okay. Just like in Vietnam, I'm sure in the commercial banks of Vietnamese bank, everything is in Vietnamese dong, right? You can have a bit of euros there, a bit of US dollar, a bit of Chinese yuan, a bit of Japanese yen. You would not be able to make any calculation. And remember, balance sheet is a financial statement. So the purpose of all of this financial statement is to make sense, right? So that people can read it and understand it. So it has to be the same currency, the same unit of account. Okay. So now that this is clear, but thank you very much. It was a very good comment. I think it's very important again that you ask as much question as possible because it benefits everyone. The second point I would like to make is what I have here. New money in the sense of US dollar has been created. Yes, in the previous exercise, the bank could create money. What I mean by creating money, I mean expanding the deposits, right? That's what I mean, right? That's creating money. You can make a loan or you can monetize foreign currencies. Those are the only two options through which a commercial bank can make money, can create money, sorry. Okay, this is very important to understand. But the bulk of it, the main important one is actually the loans, right? That's how new money is created. By the way, and that's an important point. Yes, new money is being created every time a loan is made, but every time a loan is paid back, the money is destroyed, right? In the same way as it's created when you make a loan, when the loan is paid back, money is destroyed, right? So maybe we can do that. Let's have a loan reimbursement exercise. Right? We're gonna go to our blank. That's a loan. Let's do a loan reimbursement exercise. So we had this loan that was plus 10k. And we had the deposit that was increased by 10k as well. That's exercise 2, right? Assume you're paying back half of the loan. You visited your grandma and she gave you 5 grand, right? She's a very gentle, kind, sweet, and rich grandma, right? So he gave you 5 grand, and you're going to use those 5 grand to pay back the loan, right? So now how does it work? Let me see. So no, you know, forget about the grandma story. Forget about the grandma story because here we're bringing additional information. You just have 10Ks on your account that's coming from the loan, right? And you're using some of it to pay back half of the loan. How does it work? Well, simply your deposit will decrease, right? So you can have minus. Okay, so again, forget about grandma. We love grandma, but it's gonna mess up our story otherwise. And because you're paying up half of the loan, then again, the loan side is decreasing, okay? Therefore, the new loan total is 5 grand, just like your new deposit is also 5 grand, okay? So yes, money supply has, the money supply has decreased now. Okay, so for the total, it used to be 10K. And it's no longer 10K because now you've paid back the loan, right? So it's 5K. Okay. So the balance sheet, that's my point. The balance sheet of the bank has shrinked. The deposits have shrinked. So when you pay back a loan, that's what it means. Paying back a loan money is being destroyed. Exactly and when a loan is given, money is created. You see, so what I'm trying to say here that when you make a loan, new money is created. When you pay back a loan, that should be CK, new money, the money is being destroyed. Okay, so the reason I'm saying this is because I don't want you to think that the money supply keeps increasing every time a loan is being made. No, it does, but every time the loan is paid back, uh, the money is some money is being destroyed. Okay, and obviously the net is going to be positive. So question number 2: what are the implications for the supply of for the money supply of trade surpluses and trade deficits? So I'm going to move back to share notes here. So answer to question 2 of exercise 3. Well, trade surplus means foreign currencies are entering the country, right? For instance, China. China is a net exporter. It sells a lot of goods to the rest of the world. It sells more goods to the rest of the world than it buys goods from the rest of the world. So that means it has a trade surplus. That means a lot of foreign currencies are entering the Chinese economy and therefore the Chinese banking system. But those foreign currencies are being monetized as in question 1 exercise. So conclusion: countries running trade surpluses and to see an increase in their money supply unless the bank conducts some sterilization sterilization operations. We're going to be seen later. We're going to talk about sterilization operation. It's pretty much buying back this new money created by the banking system using the reserves, right? But the important thing to realize is that, yes, so the bottom line of this exercise, first of all, new money can be created also when foreign currency are monetized. And second, countries that run trade surpluses, they tend to see a large inflow of foreign currencies. Some of those foreign currencies are monetized. That means they are turned into the domestic currency, just like in my exercise, right? You see, that's what's happening here. The foreign currencies, they enter the asset side of the bank, and as a result, the deposit of the customer, perhaps the exporter, has increased. There's a way to cancel that effect on the money supply. It's called sterilization operation, and we're going to see that perhaps tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. It's when the central bank sells bonds and securities to the commercial bank in exchange for base money. We're going to see that. So conversely, obviously, if you're running a trade deficit, then this tends to mean that your money supply is decreasing. Okay, but we're going to come back on this. All right, so do you guys have any question before I move on? All right, it looks like there's no questions, so I'm going to move forward. So this slide is extremely important. Why is that? Because it highlights the difference between banks and non-banks. This is a bank here. No, sorry, this is a non-bank. This is you and me. If you want to make a loan to some of your friend, how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to use money that you already have. So that's why you have, assume you want to lend $10 to a friend. You're going to have to use the money that you already have. So it's already an asset for you. So you remove some of your money from your wallet or from your bank and you give it to your friend. So it's a loan. So in your asset side of your balance sheet, you have minus 10 on a deposit, plus 10 on the loan. So the difference is zero. Right? Your balance sheet has not increased, it's zero. For a bank, and I'm sorry if it doesn't show up properly, that's perhaps probably due to Canvas. A bank is very different. When a bank makes a loan to a customer, it does increase the loan on its asset side, but it doesn't decrease its asset size. It increases its liability side. So as you can see in the case of the bank, the total assets have increased by 10 and the total liabilities have increased by 10. That's really, really important, right? For normal people just like you and me, for normal businesses, even for the government, if you make a loan, you have to use your own resources already. Okay, that's what it means by minus 10. Yeah, for deposit. When you're a bank, you have this amazing ability to create money just by expanding your balance sheet, just by expanding what you owe pretty much to the client, what you owe to your customers, right? But because debt, uh, those deposits circulate as money, that's why you have this ability to create money. Okay, so conclusion: banks can create new money. Non-banks entities cannot. This is really critical. All right, limits to money creation. Again, feel free to interrupt me anytime if you have questions. I'm more than happy to take them. Yes, it looks like someone is typing, so I'm going to wait for the question to be typed. Oh, no, it has stopped. So apparently there's no question. So I'm going to move forward. So the limits to money creation. So what we've seen is that banks have this amazing ability to create new money by expanding their balance sheets through deposits and loans or monetizing foreign currency. What are the limits to that process? Well, in the end, private banks have the ability to create private money. Even better, they charge you for borrowing it. What does that mean, charge? That means they're making you pay, right? So, and that's how they make a living. So it's an amazing job being a banker in a sense, right? You create stuff, you create money, and you make people pay for using it. Sounds like Donald Trump's sort of slogan. You're gonna make your customer pay for it, right? I find it interesting, right? The banks they make money and they make you pay for using it. Very smart. But the convertibility of this private money into base money puts a cap on that process of money creation. Yes, this is the leaks I was talking about, right? Um, the first two in particular, there are some leaks, right? In the following sense, if you create money as a bank, if you make up loans, if you give loans to people, you're going to increase the amount of deposits, and therefore you're going to increase the amount of money that people have, and therefore you're going to increase the probability with which they're going to withdraw money to in the form of cash, for instance. So the more money you create, the more likely you are to face cash withdrawals. And you know that cash is base money. It's not the money that you have created. That's why we call that a leak, right? You have to convert that money into base money if someone asks for cash. And second, you have this interbank payment. Again, it's very important to realize the more money you create as a bank, the more likely you are to be in debt at the end of the day. Remember exercise one, right? Both banks had the same balance sheet, right? Well, if one bank makes a lot of loans, whereas the other bank makes no loan, for instance, just to make things very simple, then the first bank that makes a lot of loans gonna it's likely it's gonna be in debt every single day, right? So that means every single day it's gonna have to make payments to bank B, to the other bank that's not making any loans. So and we know that interbank payments are being made with base money. So that means that the base, this bank making a lot of loans, we need a lot of base money. First, because of cash withdrawal. Second, because of interbank payment. And third, because of the reserve ratio. Yes, if you expand your deposits, then mechanically, if you apply 3% to an expanding amount of deposit, you're going to need more base money, right? That's mechanical. 3% of 100 is smaller than 3% of 1,000, right? It's $3 in the first example and 30 in the second. So the bigger your, the larger your balance sheet, the larger your deposits, the more likely you are to need base money. The problem is, that's the next slide, base money is not free. You know this M0. M0 is not free, right? It's costly. Why is it costly? Because it is money issued by the central bank, and the central bank will make you pay every time as a bank you need base money. And that particular cost is the famous interest rate that everybody talks about, right? What we call uh, the federal funds rate, for instance, in the US, right? The policy rate. Yes, I guess the best vocabulary is policy rate because you can use that in any country. What is the policy rate? The policy rate is the interest rate that commercial banks pay to the central bank every time they borrow base money from um, the central bank, right? So the policy rate is the interest rate that commercial banks pay to the State Bank of Vietnam every time they borrow base money from the State Bank of Vietnam, right? So you see, that's how monetary policy enters the picture. And that's we're going to talk a lot about monetary policy tomorrow, but that's how it enters the picture. We have all these banks, they are making loans, they are receiving payments, they're monetizing foreign currency. So there's a lot of things going on, but every time they need base money, and we have three instances in which for which they need base money: cash withdrawals, interbank payments, and the reserve ratio. In every single instances they're going to need base money, but base money they're going to have to borrow it. Typically they borrow it from the central bank. We're going to see tomorrow that they can borrow it from the interbank market as well. They can borrow it from other banks, but the main point is the following: base money is not free, it's costly, right? Whether you borrow it directly from the central bank at the policy rate, or whether you borrow it from other banks at the interbank market rate, right? That money is costly. That base money is costly. And that's how monetary policy enters the picture, because you can see now that the central bank can increase or decrease this interest rate in order to try to influence the process of money creation by commercial banks. How? Well, assume you think that there's too much credit being made in Vietnam, where you can raise the policy rate, you can raise the interest rate, and therefore the commercial banks will pass on this interest rate to the customers. We're going to see that, and that's going to decrease the amount of loans being taken out, right? So very important, base money is not free. Base money is costly, and that's how you can influence the process of money creation. Second, in addition to a direct cost, and that's the interest rate we talk about, there's an opportunity cost. What is an opportunity cost? You have the definition here. Opportunity cost represent the potential benefits an individual or businesses misses out or foregoes when choosing one alternative over the other. So pretty much an opportunity cost is what you lose by making a decision. Right? Assume, for instance, you want to buy a car and two car that you enjoy very much, but you decide to buy one car when the opportunity cost of buying this car is the fact that you will not enjoy driving the other car. Okay. In the case of banks, what does that mean? It means that if you look at the bank's balance sheet, for instance, this one, reserves is an asset for a bank, but it doesn't yield anything. It's just plain cash, either in the form of bills for the ATM machines or in the form of deposit at the central bank, but it doesn't pay any interest. Whereas loans, for instance, they do pay an interest, right? 10%, for instance. So my point is having money in the form of reserve for a commercial bank is costly, not only because you need to borrow it either from the central bank or the interbank market and you're going to have to pay an interest, but on top of that, it's sitting on your asset side without having any return. By contrast to loans or even securities, we're going to see that uh, most of the time they're going to be a big securities account here in the balance sheet, and securities are either paying dividends or on interest. Okay, so I want to finish this before I let you go. There's only a couple of slides left. So the bottom line is this: the more you create money as a bank, the more base money you need. And base money is not free, it's costly. First, because of the interest rate you pay to access it, and second, because of the opportunity cost. The fact that you have resources in the form of cash that doesn't pay anything, interest or dividends. How do banks acquire base money? So this is just a summary of what we just said. When they have two options, they can borrow base money from the market of base money, that's the interbank market, we talk about that, or they can borrow directly from the central bank, and that's what we call the policy rate. But both options are costly. As we will see, monetary policy is all about making access to base money more or less expensive for commercial banks in order to boost or limit money creation by commercial banks. I'm going to answer your question in a minute. I just want to finish those slides so that tomorrow we can start with the section 2. But I think I'm done now, so I'm going to answer the question. So who do we need limits on money creation? I mean, what are the consequences of banks making as much loan? It is creating as much money as they want. Very good question and very good answer. But your answer when you're saying inflation, it's a good answer, but it's not the bank's problem, you see. So the bank could say, well, how about making as much money as I want? It's gonna make inflation. I don't care. It's everyone's problem. It's not really mine. So the reason why banks will not create too much money is because they want to make sure they make money to people that can pay back the loan. Because if they do not pay back the loan, it's a loss for the bank. And a loss means if you keep making losses, then it's going to decrease your equity and eventually you're going to go bust. I think I have an exercise on this. I'm going to make you play with balance sheets and banks making losses to see. But you're right. There has to be some sort of balance, right? As a bank, you don't want to make too few loans because then you're not going to be making money. But you don't want to make too many loans either because then that means you're probably lending to people that do not have the ability to pay back. So you may be making a loss in the future. And that's why, by the way, banks hire and employ a lot of people working on what we call credit scores, right? I'm sure you've heard about that, credit scores. A credit score is about giving a grade or a number to your customers, whether they're high income customer that can pay back their loans, or whether they're poor with very little income, and that's going to be difficult for them to pay back. So banks do that. They calculate credit scores for their customers, and they tend to lend money to people that can pay back. That's what we have a saying in the West. You may have something similar in Vietnam, which goes like this: banks only lend to rich people. Aha. It's not exactly true. We know it's not true. Banks tend to lend to everyone, but they proportionate the loan to the paying back capacities of the customer. You see. So, but we're going to come back on your question. I don't know whether it's a sir or madam. What is the limit to money creation? I guess we're going to talk about that tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. But I just want to give you a quick answer now. If you make too many loans, probably you're lending money to people that will not be able to pay back, and that's going to be a loss for the bank, and that means decreasing equity, and eventually, if you keep doing that, going bust. Everybody loses. Okay. uh, the inflation thing, we're going to talk about it as well. If all banks do that, then there might be some inflation, and that's the point of monetary policy, by the way. Playing with interest rates. You're very welcome. I'm really sorry about that. You guys gonna have to teach me how to distinguish a male first name from a female first name. I have no idea. It's embarrassing. But that's normal. I'm French, by the way. Um, so yes, we're gonna talk about inflation and how central banks try to control inflation, because that's their job. The main job of central banks is precisely to limit, to keep some sort of control on that process of money creation, to make sure that there's no inflation going on in the economy. Thank you. Haha, I remember that. Other comment: I think it is the risk that people withdraw cash and interbank payment. Yes, that's right too. That's right too. We talked about that about 10 or 15 minutes ago. The more money you create at the bank, the more likely you are to face cash withdrawals, to face interbank payments, and also to need cash because of the reserve requirement ratio. And all of that is costly. So that's another limit. So you have endogenous limit, the one I talked about going bankrupt, and you have exogenous limit that are related to monetary policy. It's also about liquidity risk. Yes, that's somehow related. Yes, if you have a very big loan portfolio, but there's not much, you don't have much liquidity on your asset side, that could be a problem. We're going to talk about that as well. All right, so no, I'm not a lady. I thought my why are you saying that? By the way, you are a lady. That's fine. Because my first name doesn't sound very girly, but Mrs. Anne. Okay. Okay, very good. Question. Do you have any question? I'm happy to take a few more questions if you want. Otherwise, we're gonna call it a day and meet tomorrow. All right, it looks like yes, perhaps one question. I'm waiting for the question to show up. Can you tell me more about leaks? Yeah, we're gonna come back on it, but what is a leak? A leak is the fact that there's some money going out of a bank's balance sheet, right? You see, remember exercise two? So uh, you had this bank A that was making a loan to its customer, but that money went out immediately because the customer used the money to buy a car from a customer banking at bank B. So that's why we mean by leaks, in the sense that you create money which immediately transfers into needs for base money, at least because of the reserve ratio requirement, and that money goes out. So it is a problem. But you have to understand as well that there are payments uh, within banks as well. So if money is leaking out of your balance sheet, there's some money leaking out of other banks' balance sheet back into your own balance sheet. So that's what we mean. When the bank loses, it is deducted from the money created by the bank. So that means the bank actually didn't lose money, right? Unless the loss is greater than what the bank generates. No. Remember, um, so we're going to work on this exercise, right? But when you write off a loan, that means that you are not expecting the loan to be paid back. So it's not like so it's not like so assume the guy takes a 10 grand loan. So you have plus 10K on the loan side, plus 10K on the deposit. Then he spends the money on some silly stuff. So he has zero on his deposit. So he cannot pay back the loan, right? Um, So if he spends the 10 grand, everything else equal, the base money on the asset side of the bank is going to have to fall. So the balance sheet is again balanced. But the loan is still sitting on the asset side. So if he doesn't pay it back, you're going to have to write it off to, to write minus 10K on the asset side. And you have to put minus 10K on the liability side, this time in terms of a loss, right? Because the money is gone. The guy cannot pay back. So I'm gonna design an exercise to make it very clear to you. But I know it looks like the bank has created something like out of nowhere. So how is it a problem if that money disappears or does not pay back? It is a problem because that money was used to make a payment, and that means the bank had to use some of its base money to make that payment, and that base money is gone now. So if you don't pay back the loan, it's gonna turn into a loss, and therefore reducing equity. But I'm going to make an exercise on this. Okay. Thank you. Which will decide whether a bank should borrow from central bank or from internal market? I don't know. I have no idea. I guess people in the liquidity department or in the base money department, whoever handles the liquidity needs of the bank would decide. And it depends on institution. Treasury department, yes, thank you. Um, it also depends on the country. For instance, in New Zealand, there is no interbank market. The country is too small. It's too small, 4 million people, so they don't have an interbank market. They just have a central bank. You want to borrow money, you borrow from the central bank. That's it. Okay. In Vietnam, it's big enough. You have an interbank market. Of course, in the US, in Europe, you have an interbank market. So it depends. We're going to talk about that. But for instance, in the US, typically banks go to the interbank market to borrow most of the time. If they don't go to the money market, to the interbank market, it means smells trouble, right? A bank that goes to the Fed to borrow money smells trouble. It means they were not able, they didn't manage to borrow from the interbank market. What does that mean about the situation of this bank? Is it in trouble? So typically there's some sort of stigma, what we call a stigma banks in the US when they borrow from the Fed directly, because it means that they were not able to get the money from the interbank market, and they were not able to get it, perhaps because they're in trouble and people know about this trouble. You see, so it really depends on the country. You have a lot of very interesting situations going on here. Not too sure about Vietnam. Maybe we have someone among the 30 plus students attending today who knows a bit about that. It looks like someone does. So very interesting. We will be able perhaps to come back on it at some point. Perhaps one or two more questions. If not, I guess And there doesn't seem to be any additional questions. So I guess I'm going to thank you now very much for attending this class. We're going to meet again tomorrow, same time, same place. We're going to do probably a bit less exercises tomorrow, perhaps only one. And we're going to talk a lot about monetary policy, right? And in particular, how and why central banks need to control that process of money creation by banks, all right? So we're going to do that tomorrow. So I'm going to give you my greetings, wish you a very nice evening, and I see you tomorrow. Goodbye.